record. Wow, 2 out of 2 classes tonight. I remembered to hit record. I'm so proud. So, all right, share my screen. Thank you, Beth. I appreciate the encouragement. Speaking to my quadrant, my need. So, why the first question, believe it or not, for some of you, you may not have even asked this question yet. And some of you may already have an opinion on this question, but why should a counselor obtain state licensure? Because frankly, there's a lot of people who do counseling in the schools. There are prevention specialists, all kinds of positions in agencies that are kind of case managers and things like that. So why do you even need a state licensure? And it really centers around client welfare. Every part of the process, it's not just the master's degree and the education, although that's a huge part of it. Everything that's in your master's degree, I can assure you, because I had a big part in making it so, is there because your state statutes require it. And we're going to do a little scavenger hunt tonight, and you'll see directly exactly what I'm saying. So client welfare, these are things that we know through the years as counselors. This is what counselors need to know. And unfortunately, we learn some of these things the hard way, but they're there for a reason. Credibility and recognition, obviously, you want to have the license so people know that you're qualified. Accountability. But there's also this idea of professional covering. Sometimes people get the idea, I'm less open to lawsuit if I'm not a licensed counselor versus if I am. And that can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. You're gonna have to look at your own particular situation. But by and large, you actually have more covering as a licensed clinician because you know how to do it right. Doing it right isn't actually as hard as it may seem. And with the right education, the right licensure, the right supervision, it's easier to make less mistakes once you're a licensed clinician than not going through all of those steps, because there's a lot more to the preparation of being a counselor than just the actual degree. Believe it or not, the test in some ways is formative for you and helps you to see things in a certain way. And then definitely the supervision hours after your degree will be so helpful. Some of the things that students love about the Townsend degree is that we are so applied. We have you do homework partners, you practice certain skills, you have an additional techniques course, which is 610. And so you're practicing almost constantly. Like there's so much more practice. The thing I want to sometimes tell students is you're going to have thousands of hours of practice after you get the degree. That's really going to help you perfect your technique that's already baked into the licensure process. And so that getting the licensure, you miss that. You can't get the supervision. I mean, you could, and just, I guess, decide not to get supervised after getting all those hours. But it really is being an ethical counselor and being licensed as a counselor is actually quite a bit of covering in itself. It is ethical to be licensed in what you're doing. You don't want, there's a lot of people out there who are great teachers, but maybe aren't certified or licensed to be a teacher. You kind of typically, the general public wants to see that someone is certified and licensed for the most part. And of course, again, there's exceptions. I've personally, having been a principal, known some really exceptional teachers who let their certifications lapse, and I love them very much. But on the whole, it's good. And then, of course, for reimbursement, there needs to be licensure. And so there's parts to licensure. You've already kind of heard me alluding to it. There's the academic training, which is your master's degree. There's the testing, which will depend by state. We're going to go into that a little bit. There's the supervision piece. And then, of course, as Tori mentioned, there's the documentation of all of that. So that big D word. So each state specifies semester credit hours for licensure. More and more over my time as a counselor. I got my master's degree in 2000. I finished it in 2000. And so that's 23 years ago. There was an actual time, believe it or not, that there were some states that would allow you to get licensure with 48 hours rather than 60. But as CACREP and counseling has become self-regulating, more and more states, almost all states now require that 60 units. And they also require them in 8 core content areas. And those are the courses that you take in this program and any other counseling program that's accredited. So those are going to be human growth and development, theories, clinical, which is named multiple different names around the country, from abnormal psychology to psychopathology to clinical skills, psych testing, career diversity, ethics, and then this foundations intro class to the field. And so those are those basic 8, but there are some states, and again, we're going to explore some of that tonight, that have looked at their state's population and said, look, there are some areas that we feel like all of our mental health counselors or licensed professional counselors need to have additional training in. And since we're licensed at the state, many states have this and many states don't. So for Florida, one of the special requirements that they enacted in 2001, just after I finished my degree, all my nice 64 units at that time, they said, oh, whoops, sorry, you need a substance use class. Well, I wasn't really interested in addiction, so I did my extra units for that degree in hypnosis. So, so I had to go back and get a substance abuse class before I could get my licensure. And it's the same with some of you. If you're in California, you're required to have a psychopharmacology class and human sexuality, which means that you can't take those fun elective classes like me and learn how to hypnotize people. In Texas, you also have a marriage and family requirement and a psychopharmacology. Just different states have different populations and they make those decisions in the best interest of the people of their state. And so that should be on your grad plan, but you also, our advisors are top notch. We care deeply about giving you the right grad plan based on your state. But part of this class is to equip you with the ability to look at your state statute and know what you need. So my advisor, I didn't have an advisor at UCF that said to me, hey, they're thinking about passing the substance use legislation. And so I had to go back and get another class. It happens all the time. Not a big deal. And if it happens to you, you'll get through it just like I did. But I want you to be able to go into the statutes and find those requirements for yourself. Next piece is, and these are the CACREP content areas I was kind of listing through very quickly. There's research too on there. One of the things that CACREP has done is most of the states now have a special category for CACREP. And so CACREP programs that are accredited, CACREP's already went in and done all the dirty work to accredit a program. And so many states have like a box that literally says CACREP check. And so they don't even look, I mean, they look at your transcripts to verify it's a CACREP approved program, but it's a completely different review process when you come from a CACREP approved program, because CACREP would not approve it if all of the things that the state requires are not in there. However, CACREP doesn't require human sexuality or substance use or psychopharmacology. So those state-specific things that aren't part of these core content areas that all states require, you still need to be on the lookout for that. So the next area after your educational preparation program, and believe it or not, and if somebody in this room thinks this, please do not feel anything, but just, don't feel bad at all. But there are folks that think like you get the degree and that's the licensure. But the master's degree, regardless of where you get it, it's just the educational preparation part. Just like teachers will have a teaching degree and then a state licensure, same thing for counseling. And so we have a licensure examination. Now, part of our process tonight is you're going to look up your state and find out exactly which one, but there's actually 2 of them. There's the NCE exam and the NCMHCE exam. And so some states require one or the other, and some states accept both. Good rule of thumb, not that it really matters that much, but the later your state adopted LPC, well, first of all, LMHC is the original name of the older programs will have the LMHC, the newer programs, and by new, I mean like 20 years rather than 30. So not a lot new, but the newer programs typically use the LPCC or LPC. older programs, states like Florida that have had a really long time, or LMHC, Indiana, LMHC, or at least some of them are converting, but at any rate, but the exams are kind of the same way too. Typically the states that have had it the longest will say NCE. And some of the newer states, or depending on the state or their particular philosophy, they're the ones that will have the NCMHCE. And they have that because the philosophy difference is kind of comes under the structure of the exam. So states that require the NCE, or if you have an NCE option, this is a test that has 200 multiple choice questions. It's going to be based on professional practice and ethics, diagnosis and treatment, certain areas of clinical focus, treatment planning, counseling skills and intervention, and core counseling attributes. So there's going to be a lot of multiple choice question and answer. They're going to ask you things from like your lifespan human development course, like, you know, this is one of Erickson's psychosocial stages, or psychodynamic theory is X, Y, and Z, or Carl Rogers was associated with which therapeutic movement, you know, person-centered therapy, that sort of thing. Or the newer, the NCMHCE, this one has case studies and then questions around those case studies. So they'll give you a case example, like maybe, you know, a particular person exhibiting a certain textbook type of diagnosis. And so you're going to then choose which diagnosis, and then they're going to ask you questions about maybe what theory you would use, or they'll try to interlace other developmental things or ethical things in there and things like that. And so sometimes states actually have thought this through, and there's states that like prefer a more applied test and some that more like a more general knowledge. Some states like Texas don't care. They're like, take one of these and pass it and you're fine. So you pick whichever one you want is fine. So there's the exam. Also, states will regulate when you can take the exam. There are some states that'll let you take the exam before your degree's even over. In Florida, I took mine right after I finished my degree, but there are other states that require you to take the exam actually after you finish your licensed internship. And every state even calls that period of supervision after your degree under a clinical supervisor by many different names too. Some cases they'll call it a mental health intern. Sometimes they'll call it an LPCC, and then the degree is LPC. Others will switch it to LPC and then LPCC. But all of that language from your state, we're going to explore that so that you know all of that. And so NBCC, the National Board of Certified Counselors, regulates these exams, and they can be taken after the master's degree is awarded, and you can even sit earlier if you're in a state that allows that. I would highly recommend, go ahead and put it in your mind now, to take whatever preparatory program that you need to take to be ready for this exam, because your degree is going to be 2 to 3 years. And when you are sitting there under the pressure of, say, a computerized test, and they're asking something from a class that you took 3 years ago, for you to tell the difference between cognitive, well, you probably know the difference between cognitive behavior and psychodynamic, but Adlerian and this other parsed out piece of person-centered, you're going to want to go ahead and take the study materials. I'd also advise you to, from a neuroscience perspective, take the type of preparatory program for the type of test you're going to take. If for some reason you are going to be in a situation where you're taking a paper and pencil test, use the paper and pencil study materials. If you're going to be taking a computerized proctored exam at one of the sites, then take a computerized test prep thing. And so they'll give you practice exams on the computer, so you'll be more comfortable when you take it on the computer. So whatever way you learn it is the way that you should take it. That's a much more efficient way for your brain to recall more information. So there's all sorts of study materials with that. You're pretty far from all of that. But after you finish your educational program, and after you pass the test, in some cases or before, there's this period of time where you are practicing, but you are actually working under someone else's license. This period of time kind of can be different, and the terminology can be confusing. I think this is where most students get confused, is the difference between practicum internship before your degree is over with, which is all called field work, and then the internship or the license internship or the supervision or whatever the state's terminology you live in for after you actually get your degree and take the test. And so those particular pieces can be really difficult to parse out. But typically for our purposes, we're going to call this period after your degree supervision. Each state requires between 2,000 and 4,000 hours of supervised practice post-master's degree, and the average number of hours is 3,500. Usually this takes 2 to 3 years, but don't be ashamed if it takes you longer than that. It took me 5 years. Like I said, I was a principal at the time, didn't have a ton of extra time for this. The supervisor, though, with very few exceptions, has to be someone who has taken a course that allows them to be certified as a supervisor. Texas is really handy. They do like LPCC-S for supervisor. So you can see it right on their license. Florida, there's like an 18-hour continuing ed course they have to take. Indiana doesn't have a supervisor designation. It just has to be somebody who's been practicing a certain number of years and they're fine. And so you'll have to parse that out in your state. But you do have to meet regularly with that supervisor. Typically, rule of thumb is like every 15 hours or once a week with the supervisor to talk about your caseload and things like that. And so now comes the fun part, is I would like you guys to go on a little scavenger hunt. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes, and I want you to take a look in the laws and rules for your state and answer these questions for me. You can just write it on a piece of paper right there or whatever, but like for clarity for everybody else, because I know in your what is a counselor thing, you named the title in your state, but just so everybody else knows, because they'll learn about your state too, so that's good. But your name and state, so I'm Margaret, my state's Florida. Special classes, we had to take substance use, as you've heard. Field work hours, I had to take 1,000 hours before I finished my degree. We had 100 practicum and the rest were internship, I think. Then exam, I took the long one. I think the NC, what was it called? NCMHCE exam. And then for supervision hours, I had to get 1,500. So take just a few minutes. I am going to turn my screen off. You're welcome to do the same. And when you find the answers to all of these, you can just come back on screen quietly and we'll get back together in 10 minutes. Okay. I'll leave this up. All right, Joshua, what did your state say?
So for my state, excuse me, I have to complete a practicum of at least 600 hours.
Mhm.
And then I have to take the NCE.
Mhm.
And then once I get my PLPC, I have to do 3,000 hours of supervision.
Mhm.
And there's a few little requirements in there too, like 1,200 of those hours have to be in direct service,
Mhm.
and different, like minimum 15 hours per week. I have to do at least 15 hours per week. I can take as long as I want to get it done, but I have to at
Mhm.
least do 15 hours a week.
Very
So,
good. And which state are you?
and I'm in Missouri. Sorry.
Missouri.
Yes.
Missouri. And you're going to be called, remind me, you'll be LMHC? No, LPC.
I'll be a PLPC and then an LPC.
PLP. Okay, very good. Very good. So your licensed internship is PLPC.
So I'll do a practicum without the
Mhm.
PLPC, and then I'll be
Yes,
provisionally licensed. Yeah.
perfect. Very good. Thank you, Joshua.
Yeah.
All right. Who else finished their scavenger hunt and wants to share?
I will. I'm Emily, and I'm now in Wisconsin. So I'm learning where I am, which is exciting. I need to take family partnership and couples counseling, apparently.
Mhm.
And I need a 100-hour practicum, 600-hour internship. I can take either of the exams. I need 3,000 hours post-graduation, which I have 48 months to complete.
That's a pretty tight timeline.
Yeah, I thought so too. And then there was something on there that I was interested. It said that there is an application for pre-approval as an educational program in professional counseling. Is that
Mhm.
something that I need to have somebody fill out, or is that probably fine since we're CACREP accredited, or do you know anything about
Since
that?
I would look on your state statute and we can look together if you want, but there
Okay.
should be something in there. And I just closed out another state, which is too bad, where it will say in the state statute, CACREP or
Okay,
like it'll
I will
say
look.
A CACREP or, and then the B will go into all of the individual requirements. And sometimes they'll even have a worksheet, and that worksheet sounds like what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
And I think Maryland does a pre-approval as well. And so we have actually filled out pre-approvals for people before, but I think that was prior to getting CACREP. But
Okay.
you should see, let me just pull up Florida since I was just there. Hold on, what it looks like. Yeah, so I'll show you what it looks like. So right here where it goes into, see where it says CACREP A or non-CACREP, look for something similar to that.
Okay.
And then what you'll see, for instance, if it's non-CACREP, you expand that out in this particular case. So this will be all your basic courses. All CACREP approved programs have that, but in this case, you're doing non-CACREP. And then they'll have, like in this case, they have an education worksheet where someone fills that out for your program. But again, that's for non-CACREP programs applying.
Okay.
So Wisconsin, I'd be willing to bet that's your situation. However,
I'll look and see.
Yeah, make sure. Like I said, the only pre-approval we've ever done was Maryland, and that was prior to CACREP. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You got it. I would love for a couple more of you to show. I think it's really educational for you guys to hear what the other states require, because it helps you know what you don't know, kind of thing. So
I'll go.
thank you.
I'm in Florida, and so it's an LMHC. As far as special classes, I think there's a couple, and I've looked at them before. I couldn't find it exactly this time, but I think there's a sexuality class and a substance abuse class that's required.
Yes, ding, 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 ding. Good job.
And then also, I think that I have to have an extra internship in there.
You
because
do.
it's 400 hours of direct and 600 hours of indirect client
Yeah.
to be recognized. And so then after that, and my question is, because it's 2 years of postmaster supervised
Mhm.
experience. And so the way that reads is you need the 2 years before you can take the exam, if I'm reading that
No,
correct?
it's
Okay.
let me pull
I know
up the
there's
statute.
hours.
Yep. And you bring
there's-
up something that's useful for everybody too, because they use terminology a lot that overlaps, and that can get really confusing. Like some states will call it supervision and they're referring to the client hours. Florida, when they talk about supervision, they're talking about your hours with your supervisor, with your clinical supervisor. And so when you look down, it's 1,500 face-to-face psychotherapy with clients,
Right.
and they're saying at least 100 hours.
Right.
So they don't want you to get to 1,500 hours with clients and not having got like the 100 hours. And it's kind of like what Joshua was saying in Missouri, where he said he had to meet with someone every 15 hours. That
Right.
was the rule of thumb in Florida too, when I went through.
So, but my question is right above that: supervised
Mhm.
experience, 2 years of postmaster supervised experience. And so I'm in no hurry to get those 1,500 hours, 1,500 hours done. But the way that reads is that I wouldn't even be eligible to take the exam until after 2 years of postmaster or after 2 years of supervised experience.
You
Would that
can
be correct?
go, no, you can go right into it. They're saying it's
Okay.
got to last at least 2 years. Like
Yeah,
you can't
yeah,
just
that's-
buzz through it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. That's what I
But
thought.
but I think I've heard you that like you couldn't start the clock ticking on your hours until after.
No,
2 years.
I was saying that no matter how quick I got the hours done, it was still, there's a
It'd be
2
2
year.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, which it
Yeah.
will take me that long. So that's
Oh,
not a big
yeah.
deal. And
Yeah.
then the exam is the NCMHCE for
Yep,
Florida.
that's correct. Yeah. Perfect. Don't you love for endorsement? Prior to 2000, you're exempt from taking the NCMHC. I got my degree in 2000. They also came out with that substance use thing right after I graduated too. So apparently they were just after me, but I got through it, and
No.
you guys will get through it too.
I was talking to my supervisor, and he said at one time, like because we have to have 1,500 hours of client work, supervised. He said at one time he felt like Florida was really high up there, one of the higher
Yes.
states. And he said that's not the case any
That's
longer, that
true.
there's a lot of states out there that are requiring a lot more of those hours. So
That's right. That's right. And I think too is like Florida, the one thing where Florida kind of gets you, and you guys have to pay attention to this, and you'll learn more about this in your fieldwork classes. And for the purposes, because states use such different terminology, I just want to say this. When I use fieldwork consists of your practicum and your internship prior to graduation. Now, field work gets thrown around a lot, but in the purposes of our program and most programs, field work is your practicum and internship prior to graduation, and your supervision, like the supervision that happens after your degree, is your licensed internship after your degree when they're talking about that. So the way Florida gets you, and this is a good example to all of you guys, is that 1,500 client contact hours. But you notice in most states that would all be direct hours. And then they would have indirect hours. Florida's not requiring any indirect hours. They're not giving you hours, say, for some of these other things. They're requiring 1,500 client contact. Joshua was able to break his down into a certain amount of indirect and a certain amount of direct. So just those little things to pay attention to as you move into those phases, just kind of file those away in the back of your mind. Which is why it's so important to get a good supervisor who can lead you through that process, and why they have a credentialing process in most states, not all, Florida's one, for that supervisor so that they can lead you through that appropriately. So one more state.
I got
I
one.
can go.
Okay.
I'll let him go.
Okay, fine, I'll go. Mike, I'm in Idaho, and looking it over, it seems a little simpler. There's no
That's
special
good.
classes. There's no special classes in Idaho. All the classes listed are in KCREP. The fieldwork hours, it doesn't like you said, it doesn't list indirect hours. It just says 280 direct hours.
Okay, perfect.
And the way Idaho works is there's two licenses. There's LPC, which is like you can practice somewhere, but
Uh-huh.
LCPC means you can like have your own private practice. So for the
Nice.
LPC, you need to take the NCE exam.
Uh-huh.
For the LCPC, you got to take the NCMHCE exam. So you got to do both in Idaho at some point.
I have never seen one structured like that before,
I know.
Michael. That's really interesting.
Well, the LPC only requires 1,000 hours of
Uh-huh.
supervised, 400 direct, but the LCPC requires 2,000 direct hours.
Wow.
So it's a bit of a jump there.
That's where the
And
4,000. Yeah.
and like Jason, it says 2-year minimum.
Yeah. Very good. Tori, I'd be interested to hear yours too. Go ahead.
Okay. Minnesota, and kind of like Mike, we have two possible ones. You can be an LPC or an LPCC. An LPC both are 1,800 direct service hours, but the LPC requires 2,000 more hours.
Mhm.
Distance practice clinical counselor, you need 1,000 hours. The field work is 700. The special is the and the CE is the LPC CC is something I want more into.
Very good.
The LPC requires 2,000 more hours.
Well, maybe one's, you start your career with one and then kind of move into a different one, that sort of thing, as you get older and, time goes by and that sort of thing. Well, thank you guys for sharing about your state. And I hope this little exercise kind of gave you some things to think about. The thing you need to know is you don't need to know it all right now. You just kind of need to know how to walk into the next step. But what I'd like to do is split you guys up into breakout groups. And let me end my poll. See, yes. So I'm going to share the results of the poll. What I got a lot from the poll is people who need tonight, people to be present and convey the good and a certain amount of reality. There's one person out there who wants reality. The rest of you guys don't. So what I would like you guys to do is I'm going to split you up into breakout rooms. And I want you to just share, like, what about this entire process is the thing that you maybe, I don't want to use the word worry or nervous or anything like that, but like, what about this is like probably the thing that you feel like you could use some more confidence with? Like you feel like maybe I just don't know enough, or I'm a little nervous about it or whatever. Just share with one another that, and just kind of provide those relational nutrients with each other. And then I'll be jumping around just to kind of listen in and help out if I can. But just spend a little time thinking about this and processing this a little bit with one another. So hold on just a second. Put you in breakout rooms. Okay. There you guys go.
So I was having a hard time figuring out which electives are required for me in the state of Arizona.
Yeah. Okay.
And it used to be under degree works in our graduate plan. It used to kind of list by state, but then when I logged back in, it didn't say within our degree work. So in the old one, it said for me, Foundations of Marriage and Family had to be, I think, one of the 2 classes. I think it's 6 units. But I'm not sure now. So I wondered if maybe you could help me with that.
I would always encourage you to take a look at the statutes of Arizona. And as much as I love our degree works and I love our advisors, ultimately you want to get familiar with the state statutes in your state and be able to answer this. That being said, even in my own state, it takes a little bit of digging. Like I've been licensed in Florida for like 23 years. And it took me like 5 clicks. So
yeah, because I found a bunch of Arizona websites, but I couldn't find. I saw the CACREP requirements, but not like
Mhm.
those additional electives.
Do you have the link to your state statute there? Okay,
Hmm.
let me see if I can, 20,
Yeah, I'll put it.
3,200. Yeah.
Let's see here.
Because it may be useful to everybody to see the navigation on these two, because they're a pain.
I just posted that link, the one that I
Good.
found.
Perfect. Yeah, that's good.
I just wondered if, like, since it's no longer on DegreeWorks, if that changed or like what that
Yeah.
information was based on.
And the way that we'll want to get it is from the Arizona state statute. Like you,
Mhm.
more than DegreeWorks, like not that
Right.
I wouldn't want DegreeWorks to be right. Don't get me wrong at all. But like I want you for sure to have renewing reciprocity, practicums and internship, required exams. So let me share my screen. We'll look at this together. Yeah, I think this might be a school, like this might not be the state sponsored site.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I think this might be advertising, and they have so many dummy sites. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
it looks like
Yeah.
it's arizonastate.org.
Yeah.
So let me do a little bit of digging because it's going to take a little time to find the actual state site. And then what
Okay.
I'll do is through an announcement, I'm going to post the answer to your question, but I think everybody's going to learn from this, CJ, because I'll be able to show them where the expansion is and where the education requirements are. If you don't mind me answering through an announcement tomorrow, is that okay?
That's fine. Thanks for doing
Okay.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
you
fine.
got it. Because I do, like I said, absolutely the advisors, they report up through me. I want them to know what you're supposed to have, but I don't want you relying. I want you to find the statute, be like identify in Arizona, like this is what I do. Because what happened to me, like I said, I graduated from UCF, met the requirements, and then the very next year they passed a substance abuse law.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. So very
Yeah,
good.
that would be a bummer.
Yeah. All right. So you're mostly asking educational requirements. AZ. Got it. We'll turn it into a learning activity. Thanks, CJ.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. What other questions do we have? See if we can get 2 announcements out tomorrow.
Hi, I just wanted to know if there were any special classes for California.
California, yeah, you're required psychopharmacology and human sexuality. And then there's also some state statute requirements that we baked into the ethics class. Like you have to have like an abuse reporting, like 7 hours of that by statute. And we actually put those in the ethics class. That have you had ethics yeah, so those things are actually in there,
Yeah.
but it's the human sexuality and the psychopharmacology for you. So that's why
And,
California doesn't get to take fun electives. So, unless you like those two.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Any other questions? Any questions about the course? How's your project's going okay? You feeling comfortable with the outline coming up? Good enough.
You want to talk a little bit about that outline and like what you're expecting from it?
Well, basically, I'll point you back to the requirements of the assignment, because if I start talking and that doesn't line up with that, you're going to get confused. But without risking confusion, I would say I'm really looking for you to kind of whiteboard out your ideas for this. And so it doesn't have to be fully formed. Like say you're thinking about a project that has to do with domestic violence and you're going to base it out of a church. And maybe you're going to have one component of it is going to be groups. You can put groups and then outline what you want to do with the groups. And then the next component could be advocacy, and you can then kind of bullet what you're going to do in advocacy. So I would say just think more big picture and think more bullets than like really getting into the nitty gritty of things. And as far as APA style, this is an outline. When we're talking APA style for this, 12-point font, double spaced, I don't need a title page or a running head for the outline. And those of you, if you want to, you can actually just add it to, like if you started your 2 paragraphs that described it, you can literally add it to that document on the next page. So, I hope that answered your question, Tori,
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
without getting me into trouble. What other
On the-
questions? Yep.
On the description on the rubric, when it talks about assessment and the needs,
Mhm.
how specific to our like local community does that need to be in terms of, like, I'm thinking about working with immigrants and I don't
Mhm.
quite yet know who the key leaders are in that in my community specifically, or
You can say key
how
leaders.
local do we need to be?
Yeah, no, you can be key leaders. And Emily, I don't have any issue with it being from a community you're more familiar with. Like say, if you did want to do one in North Carolina, like it's more exercise in looking at a community and saying, I can see there's a gap here. And what does it look like for this gap to be filled? Than me heading to Wisconsin and your specific community. It's exactly this, and
Okay.
it names key leaders, that sort of thing. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You got it. Well, guys, if you need me, I'm here. I think I can't remember. I think it was this class. Somebody was hoping to catch me afterwards, so I'll hang out for a second if that was you. And I just appreciate you so much. I'm enjoying having the class with you. It's a very black and white kind of class. There's a lot of other classes that are a lot more clinical and philosophical and hands-on, but this is one of those classes that you'll be glad you had, just to help you kind of get through and navigate all of these difficult things with all of the licensures and everything. So we'll get through it together. You guys have a great night.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you. Good Dr. Christmas.
Bye.